You guys have heard of whitewashing history, but have you heard of blackwashing? Blackwashing is when you're a politician and it's election season and suddenly you have to relate to black people. So you just sort of start making stuff up to blackify yourself, your history. You start dropping a bunch of slang and colloquialisms and hoping that the people will therefore understand you. Honestly, it's become something of a democratic rite of passage. Except this time, I think we may have caught the culprit red-handed. Of course, I'm speaking about Kamala Harris. I think her and her campaign team are really going to regret the day that their media henchmen came for Janet Jackson. Welcome back to Candace.
Hello, welcome to MzansiOz Diary. My name is Connie. If you're new here, you're welcome. So I'm continuing today because, Candance Owens has brought the receipt about Kamala Harris not being really black. The black side of that family, of her paternal family, is non-existent. And now we're looking on, she's focusing on the book that both Kamala and her dad wrote. Now we're looking at dad's book, Donald J. Harris. Now, Donald J. Harris mentioned in his book that he was raised by his grandmother, Mrs. Harris, and passingly mentioned that he was not to forget. He said, "Oh, I shouldn't forget my mother, Beryl." Okay, Beryl. So the grandmother of Donald J. Harris, Miss Harris, was married to Mr. Christie, the man called Mr. Christie. So Candance Owens goes through this in more details about this story. So you can see where the hole is in the story. This story doesn't make sense. Okay, let's listen in.
We were left with some major holes in Kamala's genealogy. We had from her father, Donald J. Harris, that he grew up in Jamaica and was raised by his grandmother, Miss Iris. He effectively wrote an entire piece about his Jamaican heritage and really focused on his grandmother, like she is the person that made the most difference for him. He honorably mentioned Miss Iris's husband, who he only referred to as Mr. Christie, and remained conspicuously silent about his own mother. How do you do that? How do you just say one sentence about your mother, refer to her as Miss Beryl? And I want to be clear, you're writing this for the population, right? You're talking about your heritage. Even if you called your mother Miss Beryl, you would probably, for the sake of wanting people to be clear on who you're referring to, list her full name. He didn't do that. He just said one sentence. This is not to, ignore my mother, Miss Beryl. And that was it.
So also what is important in this history of Kamala Harris is that her father, the woman Beryl, married at the age of 24 to somebody else in 1944. That man is Lawford Newlands. That is the man that Beryl Finnegan married. There is no record of marriage between Beryl Finnegan and Oscar Harris, who is the paternal grandfather of Kamala Harris. There is no, and you also know, Candance Owens also found out that Beryl, she was the servant. She was potentially a slave in that family. Okay? And it's also that Beryl gave birth to a child named Donald J. Harris, an infant. You would say, okay, maybe that's Kamala's father. No, because that infant unfortunately died. There's a death certificate. That child died just after 1 year old, after that child turned 1 year old, because in the death certificate, say one infant, 1 year old, the age. And the name is Donald Harris. So, Tid Beryl had another child after that with Donald Oscar Harris, who is Kamala Harris. In that would have been 1938. because Kamal Harris's dad was born in 1938. And when you look at the age of Beryl at that year, Beryl would have been at least 9 years old. She would have got married and not marry Kamal Harris's dad and had this child, and she would have, what it means is that she would have actually had a child out of wedlock. Let's say this is true. She had a child out of wedlock, and that child was Donald Harris. That child died after that child was 1 year old. You see the story, how it's confusing the story? She would have, given birth to the child named Donald Harris and died after 1 year old, unfortunately. And then had another child, maybe, and then gave that child another Donald Harris. That would be Kamala's father. And then not marry Kamala's grandfather until 6 years later, and then divorce, but there's not divorce certificate somewhere, and then marry Lawford Newlands at the age of 24. That's a lot of movement during those days. Huge movement there. It's a huge movement that makes it bit dodgy. Let's listen in, guys.
Know that her full name, according to her birth certificate, is Beryl Magdalene Finnegan. And we know that at various times she took on the middle name Christie. He also mentioned in that piece that his father was Mass Oscar. I guess, again, that is kind of a slang way of referring to his father. But I was completely stumped. I was completely stumped as I was looking further into this because I could not find a marriage record between his father, Oscar Joseph Harris, Miss Oscar, and his mother, Beryl Finnegan. Like, this is something that to me seemed really odd. And some people who wanted to rationalize it were saying, oh, no, that's just how things were. And sometimes people didn't have record. No, I wasn't buying any of that because we were dealing with a family that had money. It is just a fact that Kamala Harris's family descends from slavers. They were given money for their slaves. Somebody did the calculation, essentially, for that day and time, it would have been $11 million that they inherited for their slaves once it was abolished. It is why when he speaks about his Jamaican heritage, he speaks about them as having owned stores, right? So this is not your typical Black story that we're referring to here. And so I expected very much for there to be a record of marriage. Oddly, as you guys will recall, any records that I did find suggested to me that Beryl may have been the domestic help, who may have also given birth to a son named Donald, born in 1938, who died before he even turned 2. So that was very strange. Question marks. We were like, okay, we're seeing this Beryl, we're seeing this Donald Harris, we're seeing that an infant died. What's really going on here? Why is it starting to feel like a scary movie? But of course, we want to rationalize it ourselves. Like, maybe it is just a coincidence that another Beryl had another Donald in 1938 in St. Aaron Parish, and we shouldn't look too far into that. What we knew for certain was that Beryl, the correct Beryl, was married at the age of 25. So Donald Harris, who was presenting as Kamala's father, would have been 6 years old. She got married to a man named Lawford Newland, who he has completely erased from his childhood historical account. When he wrote this piece, he did not mention a Lawford Newland, a stepdaddy named Lawford Newland. And that was odd because then it would suggest that she would have had to have married his father, Oscar Joseph Harris, after that. So have the kid, marry someone else, and then go back and marry your baby daddy. I don't know, but I needed to find some records. We also couldn't find a divorce record, by the way, between Lawford Newland and Beryl Finnegan. Where's the divorce record?
So for the wealthy Irish family that owns slave, there is no marriage record of Beryl Finnegan and the Oscar Harris, the grandfather, Kamala Harris's grandfather. That is a bit odd. That one. And there's no mentioning that they weren't married. So where is it? Where is this grandmother? Where is this Black family that Kamal keeps saying that the media wants us to believe that she's the first Black Asian woman. Where is it? Because so far it's a lot of dodginess. I would say that it doesn't make sense here. There's nothing. And the more she digs into it and investigate, doing her investigative journalist, that's what you all journalists should do. Should not stop telling people names because, they've actually kind of like doubting your views about things. People are allowed to be dumb. People like Candance Owens, if you think what she's going on is not true, she's allowed to go through that and do that. That's what the freedom of speech, freedom of information. Okay, I'm allowed to sit here and actually think that she might be true. It might be correct that what she's going about, it might be true. Then Kamal Harris and her team needs to come up and explain this. This doesn't make sense to me. Even here in Australia, I feel like, oh my God, what? Because, when you look at her, Kamala Harris, she never identified as Black until recently. She Blackification of her history. It's election season, She must be Black. We must make her Black. We must create that Black family, that Blackness, so people can relate to her. The identity side of politics that exists in all society, even here in Australia. She must have some kind of relation so that she must be seen doing something that is actually related to that community that she must win. They must be motivated to go to the poll in November in America. Okay? So let's listen in, guys. Yep.
We did see that he went to America. We searched there. He went to New Orleans. He went to California. We just could not find anything. And in my view, there were too many holes in his account. Numbers that he got wrong about the siblings. I just felt that there was a secret here. So I decided that we needed more information specifically about Donald J. Harris himself. And we couldn't find a birth certificate for him, which I flagged as odd. And I also wanted to find that marriage certificate between his father, Oscar J. Harris, and his mother, Beryl Finnegan. That was crucial to me. So here's what we stumbled upon. More information about Donald J. Harris appeared to us. This is going to get crazy, you guys. I'll tell you how we put this together. Through old Jamaican newspaper clippings that have been digitized. So first and foremost, this one fact checks, but it was a little bit of tidbit of an information that I thought was interesting. It was a wedding announcement that was published in the Kingston Gleaner. That's the name of the newspaper. It was published, as you can see here, November 1st, 1963, which just announces the wedding of presumably Kamala's mother, as we're told, Shyamala Gopalin, to Donald J. Harris. It reads, he is the son of Oscar J. Harris of Spanish Town and Mrs. Beryl Finnegan. Okay. It writes before leaving, it says before leaving Jamaica in 19, and can you pull that up because I couldn't read it for clarity, but it says before leaving Jamaica in, it looks like maybe 19, I don't want to guess it, Mr. Harris worked for the Jamaican Information Service. Okay, what is the Jamaican Information Service? That's what I asked myself. What is that? I'll tell you what it is. The Jamaican Information Service is an executive agency of the government of Jamaica that is responsible for disseminating information. It used to be known as the Government Public Relations Office. It says that to achieve its objectives, the agency utilizes a broad range of media skill sets: print, radio, television, graphic arts, video projection, and public relations. It was established in 1956. Okay, so now we know before he left Jamaica, he worked for the government. So he's got some connections in government. And he's not the only one, because that newspaper article goes on to inform us that his bride, who we're told is Kamala's mother, is the daughter of Mr. P.V. Gopalin, the Deputy Secretary of the Government of India. So she is also connected to the government of India, and her dad is the Deputy Secretary of the Government of India. That's just a thing that I think is important to know, that these two people worked for the government and they came together and they got married. Now, we still could not find a marriage record between these two, but it may be plausible that they got married somewhere else, but at least we see the announcement. So I thought, now let's focus on his father, right? I'm looking for something to attach Oscar to Beryl, presumably. This is a family that is important enough to have wedding announcements in the newspaper. Maybe we will be able to stumble upon something between Oscar and Beryl. Now, I want to remind you that Kamala brought up Oscar J. Harris, her grandfather, in her book, and she reveals a picture of him on page 282. So I'm going to show you that right now. It reads, "When I was 10 months old, I visited Spanish Town, Jamaica. This is me with my mother and my paternal grandfather, Oscar Joseph." So we know his name is Oscar Joseph Harris, and we know that that's what he looks like thanks to Kamala Harris's book. Great.
Kamala Harris was never black. She's never claimed blackness. Even her dad never claimed blackness. Her dad claimed to be Caucasian, Asian, mixed Caucasian and Asian. It's only recently when they tried to blackify her, her heritage, when she so she can appear as black. So let's listening, guys. Yeah.
Love that. So I looked him up, and at first the father came up for a bankruptcy hearing announcement. This is dated, by the way, March 11th, 1939. So this would have been 1 year after Donald was allegedly born. It just reads, "In the matter of bankruptcy petition against Reginald Victor Harris, Oscar Joseph Harris, and Newton Alexander Harris of Brownstown in the parish of St. Anne, trading as Harris Bros, take notice that the above named intend to apply for the revocation of the provisional order of bankruptcy made against them in this honorable court on the 6th day of January 1939. Okay, so we know that they were apparently going through some bankruptcy proceedings, and they were fighting those bankruptcy proceedings. They were going to stand against them. And also, what's relevant there is that we know it's him because it lists his brothers, it lists that they're from Browntown, and we have fact-checked that genealogy. So this is the correct family. This is the grandfather that Kamala is referring to in her book. Here is where it is going to get crazy. Buckle up. I really hope you guys are sitting for this. He came up again, and fortunately, it was for a wedding. Unfortunately, it was not for a wedding to Beryl. Instead, just like Beryl married somebody else, apparently he married somebody else. Now, this clipping is from June 9th, 1952. Look at this. It says, "Oscar Harris weds Vioris Cambridge." Now, I want you to look at this photo, and it certainly looks like, and I know it's a shadow on the left-hand side, but I'm going, that looks like the picture. You can tell by that balding pattern of the person that Kamala has presented to us as her grandfather, and he looks mixed race to me, but that woman on the right looks white to me. Now I know you're going, Candace, that's crazy. It's a black and white photo, but there's a certain way when you're photographing a black woman that she comes across, and that ain't it, my friends. But again, that was a theory. Let's read the article. It reads, "Vioris Cambridge, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. V.S. Cambridge of St. Elizabeth," that's another parish in Jamaica, "became the bride of Oscar Harris of Browntown, St. Anne, at a beautiful ceremony in the St. Andrew Parish Church, Halfway Tree, on Thursday last night. Her slenderness enhanced by a gown of white nylon and chantilly lace. The bride, carrying a bouquet of white asters, was given in marriage by her father. Her only attendant, her sister, Carmen Cambridge, wore a gown of aqua nylon and chantilly lace with a bouquet of pink rosebuds. The best man in the ceremony, performed by the Reverend Grant Levi of Montego Bay, was Mr. Newton Harris, brother of the groom. During the signing of the register, Mr. Gene McDonald sang, 'I'll Walk Beside You,' and 'Because,' at a reception held at the home of the bride's uncle on Chester Avenue, Mr. Milton Hamilton was master of ceremonies." I just went, what the heck is this? First and foremost, how odd that Donald J. Harris, as he's recollecting these memories from his childhood, now has left out the part where Beryl married someone when he would have been 6 years old and would have been his stepfather, but he's also now leaving out the fact that his mother similarly married someone when he was a little bit older. That his father similarly married someone when he was a little bit older, and that woman at least according to my eyes, appears to me to be fully Caucasian. But I said, like, that sounds crazy. Let me see if I can find this woman, Vioris Cambridge, by a quick Google search. Like, where? That's quite a different name, Vioris. I've never heard it before. Certainly something's going to pop up, and certainly just one thing did. And it was a funeral entry of a white woman who died in Broward County. And what I noticed about this entry was that it was very scant on details. I'm going to show this to you. Okay? Vioris Anita McPherson, it says. And I'm looking at that face on the left there, and I'm going, I recognize that face. This woman looks familiar to me. Am I crazy? Are you guys seeing? She looks a little bit like Kamala Harris. There's something about the smirk. I don't know. Am I crazy? So I said, let me not jump to conclusions. Maybe I am just so down far the rabbit hole that I'm seeing Kamala's face. So I read this entry, and it says, it is with great sadness that the family of Vioris Anita Harris McPherson Cambridge, in parentheses, so we know that that's her maiden name right there, announces her passing on Saturday, June 15th, 2019. She will be lovingly remembered by her children and spouses, her grandchildren and spouses, her great-grandchildren, cousins, nieces, nephews, and friends. We will celebrate her life on Saturday, June 29th, 2019 at 10 o'clock a.m. at Christ the Rock Community Church. It gives the address there, and it says where they will immediately follow at a reception hall. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to the Alzheimer's Foundation in memory of Vioris Harris McPherson. So nothing given to us there, literally nothing given to us about her family. Have you ever seen that? Usually survived by a sister, a cousin, a brother. I went to see if anybody posted anything. It says she has a really big family. I was like, okay, well, certainly somebody would have posted on the board. You know, people do that all the time. I'm so sorry for your loss. Love you. A cousin, I'll see you there. Hug, kisses, nothing. Very weird. And then tried to look this woman up in Broward County records, and it just looks like people are trying to protect who she was. It doesn't tell me who she's married. I don't see anything there in Broward County. It just says an entry for...
So now she's going into that story about the potential grandmother for Kamala Harris, the real one that she thinks that evidence suggests she may be the real grandmother for Kamala Harris, not the slave, the servants that she's pictured standing with the servant. I mean, those pictures don't really look like, you know, it's a grandmother loving the granddaughter sort of thing. They look very distant to me. But anyway, we don't know because, you know, you can see her picture with her family. It's lovely. The side of her mother's family is so beautiful. And you can see that's a real family. But when you look at that, it's so distant. Her paternal side of her family is so distant. That suggests to me maybe these were slave servants that were put there to have a picture with her. And, you know, and she was visiting. And they were forced to be there because they were slave. I don't know.
For a marriage that took place in 1994. And I also see that she's got another name there, McPherson, so maybe she got remarried. But it at least tells us that her birthday was October 7th, 1927. So I thought to myself, can I find a woman, a white woman who was born in Jamaica with that exact birth date, with that exact name? Like I said, a very different name, Vioris. And the answer is yes, we did. We were able to locate her birth certificate, and now we know why it said that she was married to V.S. Cambridge, and had listed her father as V.S. Cambridge, Mr. and Mrs. V.S. Cambridge. That's because her father's name is Vivian. Her mother's name is Adina Wright, and here you have it, born in Elizabeth. St. Elizabeth is... here she is. This is this woman, Vioris Cambridge, born to Vivian Cambridge and Adina Wright on October 7th, 1927 in St. Elizabeth, Jamaica. What the hell is going on? Who is this woman? Why hasn't this been mentioned? Why does it feel like this profile was being very hidden? And again, as Donald was jumping in to his family background and speaking about how Jamaican it was, why didn't he mention this? why didn't he mention this woman, his white relatives? It might be relevant when we're having a discussion about Kamala's race to mention the fact that your dad married a white woman. I'm just saying, there's another picture of her, and there's something familiar about her smile. There's something familiar. I'm looking at this woman, I'm going, this woman looks to me like Kamala Harris. Now, something even weirder, the person who did create something for her online, okay, who created a profile for her on Ancestry.com, look what he put in the middle of her name. He lists her name as Vioris Anita Iris Cambridge. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So we looked into this briefly, and again, all of this has transpired within the last 4 hours. So we are not as organized about this, or I shouldn't say, we are not as certain about this, but it looks like the person who made this entry was a member of her extended family. It looks like she got remarried in 1994 in America, and that's where she picks up the name McPherson, and that individual put Iris in quotation marks. Is it possible that Donald J. Harris, when he's fondly remembering Miss Iris, could be speaking about this woman? Well, it's possible. Everything's a possibility. Like I said, he's very scant on the details here. What we do know is that he declined to mention this woman. He declined to mention someone that his father married who was completely white. And as I said, I wouldn't have an issue with this if people were forthcoming and spoke about this. The press, as you're out there referring to Janet Jackson, is crazy, right? For suggesting, what did Janet Jackson say? She said that she heard that Kamala's father, Donald J. Harris, was Irish. Can somebody pull up that picture of Vioris again? She heard that his family was Irish. I think Vioris, maybe Vioris Cambridge, might be Irish. Was she so crazy to mention that, press? Would it be so crazy if you guys did your actual job and looked into these things as opposed to constantly trying to obscure things to protect your preferred candidates?
Yeah, there's something strange about that death announcement of Iris. You'll see very later on, this is actually the Iris, that this is the deal. That's where the dots being connected here. But there's nothing in that death announcement that actually suggests, because it's really, they don't actually mention any survived by the daughter of who, and yeah, because normally that's what you do when someone passed away. You mention the parents first. If they have a husband, you mention the husband, their daughter, the immediate family, maybe the the grandchildren. If it's enough space, you can mention their names. Not enough, you mention how many they are. 3 great granddaughter, great son. But this one, it was just her. No one else's was mentioned there. Very strange.
Because you believe she should just be handed this? Now the question is it possible that the woman that we're looking at right there is Kamala's grandmother? Is it possible, based on the records that we have, that Beryl and Donald never did marry? Is it possible Beryl and Oscar, never did marry? Is it possible, is it feasible that marriage never took place and they both married 2 different people, and that instead, at some point when they decided to blackify Kamala's history, they included this Beryl as her grandmother? Is it possible? I don't want to go too far down conspiracy lane, but I'm telling you that we're close here. This is a big missing piece of her family history that should have been mentioned, okay?
Yes, the thing that's also very concerning in this Kamal Harris' grandmother is that her father, in his book, did not mention anything about his dad marrying this white woman. You can see that there's a very huge effort to try and blackify Kamala Harris's history here, to make it black.
And I find it highly suspicious. I do not think that we have answers still on who Donald Harris is. I do not trust him. I do not trust him just having discovered this information and realizing that he left out 2 significant marriages and is instead focusing on Kamala's great-grandmother, referring to her as Miss Iris. Who is Miss Iris actually? I can tell you that, again, we came across all of this in the last few hours, but we're going to stay on them, because now that we have found this piece and we have found this white woman, and again, I'm not trying to call her out being a white woman, I'm just saying that, like, she is a white woman, she's very white, and Janet Jackson was not crazy to suggest this, and now we know that somebody is putting her in quotation marks as Iris, and a picture is starting to come together. Let me say this. If, and I'm not saying this is true, but if we find out that that woman is Kamala's real grandmother, and can we get a side-by-side of Kamala? If we find out that that is Kamala's real grandmother, and that she decided to appropriate the domestic help who potentially died younger as her grandmother, we are watching one of the most diabolical political moves that we have ever seen in the history of this country. I just want to say that. I'm not saying it's true, again, but I'm saying that I don't like the picture. I always find that the dog that isn't barking, the fact that they never mentioned these marriages, the fact that they laughed people out of the room when they suggested that Kamala Harris could be white, and the fact that they just refused to mention any aspect of this and are remaining hush-hush on it, doesn't make me feel good. I don't trust these people. There's something about Kamala saying she's in these streets that doesn't make me feel that she's being honest about who she actually is. I'm not going to let go of this. Again, we are getting closer and closer, and I will bet you the DNC is paying attention to this showdown.
Yes, it's a showdown. Oh, come November, it's becoming very interesting. So, if this is true, that means Donald Trump wasn't lying. No. It's not, it's very familiar to the story that I told you a month ago in South Africa. So this is what happened when you want to be a president of the United States. You're going to be put under microscope. It's the same thing in South Africa. If you want to be a Miss South Africa, you will be put under microscope. Your history, your genealogy will be dissected to see any bit of inch that suggests that you're not a South African. Little bit. It's a disqualification. So here, it is about the lie. It will be about the lie, because now it's like another Rachel Dolezal, someone pretending, a white woman many years ago, pretending to be black. And yeah, Kamala, your team needs to come and actually answer this question. You need to put your birth certificate to shut this thing out, to nip it in the butt, because it's getting more air on social media. I know that your elites media who are protecting you, they still think you're great and but they're not going to vote for you. The people on the ground are going to vote for you. The people on the ground are the one that watches Candance Owens and the rest of them. The people on the ground are the one that likes Janet Jackson. Okay, that's why I'm talking about it, because Janet Jackson, and I found Candance Owens, and I listen to Candance Owens. I don't agree with anything else, that a lot of things that she talks about. That's the thing. You don't have to agree with everything a person says to listen to them. That's why here in Australia, we now have this Met bill based on the fact that, the failed voice was due to misinformation. There's a lack of really reflection and understanding that they actually failed because it was pushed by the elites. It did not come from the bottom up by the people who were going to vote for this. It was from the top up, politicians and the elites. They came together, just like when they went in and say the Skills Summit here in Australia. They went over and Labour was elected. They cook up the Skills Summit, and then they brought in so many people. Now everyone else is struggling to find an affordable property to rent. So It's you. You sit around with your elites. You don't actually listen to the community. These people are the one going to go to the poll and going to vote for you. But, this is how it works. And you can't bring all this mad bill that it's going to be, even the human rights, Australia's human right, they actually already have raised concern about it. That in the current form doesn't look like it's actually a bill that's going to promote discussion, open discussion for everybody in a safe and appropriate manner to hear everyone else's voice. It's going to make it so hard for people to speak. And it's almost like, when you start doing this stuff, I think about it as when you have teenagers. If you really want to know what's going on to your children, don't try to monitor. Have an open discussion with them. Have a free, honest, open, so that they can feel free to say things to you. So you can know what's going on. If you are going to be a parent who's going to shut your kids off, your children cannot come to you and say things to you because they're afraid that you're going to go after them. They're going to lose certain privileges. They may not tell you stuff because you're not approachable. You've had created this barrier. This is how I think with this regulation stuff. So when you don't do that, you can actually monitor and give people some information about how they can look after themselves, how they can check things if things are, not good information, misinformation on social media, what's correct, what's not correct, and how to verify information that you read on social media. Some potentially is true. There's a lot of misinformation on social media, but it's not to shut the freedom of speech, of information access, just because you want to control people. Then you are going to a dangerous situation, communist type situation here. I mean, I'm not saying they are, the bill, they are communist, but it's just, why are you controlling people's voices? You want to have an open discussion. You want to hear that others think this way about certain things. If you shut that one down to regulation, you might be shooting yourself in the foot, because there'll be something that people will do that you won't hear anything about it, that they will talk about somewhere. They'll find a way to discuss things, privately, somewhere where you won't be able to hear it, where you won't be able to act, because you've made it so difficult. You stifle that open discussion in the community. People are getting scared to be free. That's not a situation you want in Australia. So this bill, the misinformation and disinformation bill, the MAD bill, it's literally mad. So I showed you a video yesterday about how you get to that. You need to go to the official website, government website, and look for that bill. If you're not registered, your details, you need to register your details, who you are, and then have a confirmation email. Then go to the bill and actually have it, type your submission, type in PDF, and then submit it through that way into online submission about you. And you can choose if you don't want your details to be published. You can choose not to be published, to be anonymous, published, not to publish your details, but you have to register to see that you are actually eligible to actually a citizen, to be able to contribute to that MAD bill, which I call it MAD, literally MAD bill. Okay, so guys, thank you for listening. Have a lovely day. Bye.